Hey, everybody. Welcome to Save World, Make Art. My name is Eugene Clark, and I am just one half of our hosting duo. Say hello to the other half, the awe-inspiring Mr. Matt Faulkner. Matt, how are you?
Hello, everybody. Hello, Eugene. It's good to be here with you all. And I'm excited about what we're going to talk about. I'm excited to be here with Eugene, talking about anything art always. But the subject that we're going to be working on today is something that is near to and dear to, I believe, both of us. But I'm just geeked about it. So,
well, Matt, I'm glad that you started us off, getting our wheels spinning as to what that might be. You know, you and I, we are into our podcasts now. They number over 20 podcasts. This could be potentially like number 22, I think it is, episode wise. So those of you that may have gone back and watched some of our other podcasts know that, you know, we enjoy talking about art. We're both artists. We met at the College for Creative Studies when we were teaching right next to each other in rooms that were, you know, adjacent from each other. And we were both in the illustration program. So we have a love for art, but we also have a love and appreciation for all things good drawing and painting.
mm-hmm.
So the place that we would like to speak about today really embodies and celebrates that notion of really good, strong drawing and painting, the underlying content that the ingredients that need to be infiltrated by said artist in order for that to shine through. So, Matt, take it away.
Well, the place we're talking about, Eugene, is what I like to think of as the sort of the mecca, not sort of, it is the mecca of American visual storytelling. Now, you can call it illustration, but I like storytelling better because it really does visual storytelling, because it really does communicate the depth. Sometimes illustration can sound just like, you know, you're just talking about the linoleum of creating. Visual storytelling is an important thing to me. And so the short of it is that in the late 1890s, an American illustrator named Howard Pyle decided to open up a school in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania. I believe it was just during the summer at first. And he was well known as an illustrator. And I think at that time he would be something like, who's the guy who did, the film director who did like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you know? Spielberg. At that time, illustrators had this presence that was as big as movie makers, successful movie makers at this time. So illustrators from all over the place, young illustrators came and they decided to learn from him, study with him. They applied to work with him, and he would work with like, I don't know, maybe a dozen students at a time. And eventually some truly talented or truly great work came out of this school, in particular by a guy named N.C. Wyeth, who's the father of Andrew Wyeth. And
so sorry to interrupt you there, Matt. We do have a photo on the screen. I don't know if you can see it, but you mentioned the school that Pyle began. The photo that we're looking at is not that school. What is this image of?
Yeah, this, thank you. Thanks, Eugene. This is the Brandywine Museum. And this is a museum that was built to house a lot of the great illustrative visual storytelling works that came out of that school. Now, it's not just that school. There's plenty of other works that are in there that are also visual storytelling, but this is the hub of the hub, as they say. And it is a fantastic resource for learning about visual storytelling, the great illustrators.
Yeah, and you know, you, Mr. Matt Faulkner, and myself have had many discussions about this particular museum and not only the work that is found inside this museum, but also what the artists and this museum mean to the world of illustration as we know it today, that was coming out of this region, that to this day still has such a major impact on young artists as they go through, especially art school. You're taking art history and you're learning techniques that you can't help but go back and look at illustrators that have come out of this particular school of painting, as we call it, to understand how the precedence that they set has since taken and elevated what has been done up to this point. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about this collection is that I can really trace back. See, I do bring it. That's why I mentioned Spielberg too, and just a lot of different ways that film directors see things, American film directors see things, was influenced by what they saw as kids. And what they saw as kids was cartoons and other illustration work that was influenced by probably these illustrators that you'll see in this museum, right?
I'm going to put an image of an artist that you mentioned. His name was N.C. Wyeth, as one of the people that studied and came out of this whole area with Pyle as the leader. I can't think of an artist that would tie in with what you just mentioned about filmmaking. When I look at this particular piece, how dramatic the lighting is, the shadow, the scenery. I mean, I literally think that I'm looking at, a still image from a film.
Yeah. And so to me, I mean, look at the atmosphere that's in that. Look at the lighting, look at the camera angle, look at the kind of lens. It's almost like a fisheye lens. These are people who were starting to see things as visual storytellers and present them in a way that had never been done before. Also, nobody had been able to print these things, these paintings. And it was around this time that printing was developing so that a broader audience could actually get more of the nuance of what you're seeing in the final art.
That's a really good point, Mr. Faulkner, because, printing, even today in modern times, I know that you as an illustrator, up to your most recent book that will be coming out in the fall, your graphic novel, up to that point, your previous graphic novel, Gaijin, American Prisoner of War, well, everything you did tangibly, you did in real time, non-digital, and it was all done, with real materials. And then you had to take those pieces and have them scanned or photographed so that they could be translated into digital printing. And you yourself said it's hard to find places, they don't exist anymore, to do quality scanning. So now you yourself have sort of jumped into that digital realm where you're working digitally for all of your drawings. And so when you talk about printing at this time period, and to think how that did start to come about, boy, that was a game changer.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And it was a big deal for these guys too. I mean, you can really see how the product influences the creator just as much as the creator influences the product. So the printing of like this piece, they couldn't do it before. There's no way that they could reprint the color. And they started to figure out how to actually create a process by which they could use blue, yellow, and red, right? Magenta, cyan, and yellow, to recreate this. I don't know how they did it, but I'm still trying to figure that out. But
Yeah.
And so yeah, today it's a similar thing. I mean, they're the companies that used to do big scans of original artwork, big, well, for me, big 18 by 24 inches. They're getting fewer and fewer. They don't know how to, or they don't want to spend the money to, and so they're asking. It's just, I don't think it's like some kind of intentional thing, like let's get rid of traditional artists. It's just that it's easier, it's faster to have people work digitally and just send them a file.
Yeah, and I think what's happened is because more people have transitioned to digital and do less of what you're talking about, therefore, the companies have not found it cost effective to maintain those facilities. Just like I can't take my old 35 millimeter camera and go and get a roll of film developed at your local photo mart anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's exactly what that's the thing, is like cost effectiveness. Why do we keep on doing this? There's just so many issues about it. So one of the things I want to continue with this is Eugene, why are we even talking about this museum? What are we, do we have an intention behind this?
Yeah, because, I think we've known each other, going on over 20 years, but I would say probably in the last 10 of those 20 years, we have shared an excitement for taking a trip together to this place known as the Brandywine River Museum because of the nature of the impact that these artists have had on our craft. And so when you think about, oh gosh, I think about a place that I like to sort of compare this to as an artist. I like to say this is definitely a mecca in a sense for me of a place that, just like in religious connotations for certain religious groups, where there is a place called Mecca where people once a year have a pilgrimage to this place to sort of become reborn in their thought process of what their beliefs are. And I think as artists, there are some places that exist today that you feel that sense of renewal if you were able to get there and sort of just take in all that there is. Like, it's funny, as artists, when we look at a painting like this, you and I, and we think about the way that we work, I've heard many artists talk about how the work speaks to them. So, when you say that to someone who's a non-artist, they'll be like, are you crazy? What, you're hearing voices? And it's more about the colors and the mixtures and the line and the values and the texture and how it all works together. And, as you see these things close up, you start to understand more about how the artist worked. And so the artist, through their work, is speaking to me. Mm-hmm. How does that translate for you?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at NC Wyeth's work, I see a power that's in there, and an understanding of the craft. But first and foremost, it's visceral. Same thing with did I say NC Wyeth or Pyle? Both of them, NC Wyeth and Pyle, and the other artists that that Pyle influenced. I just learned that Maxfield Parrish was one of his students. Frank Schoonover, Jesse Wilcox Smith, the Rose sisters. These are all like powerful people in this industry because of the way they presented feelings and ideas visually.
Yeah.
100 years ago, 125 years ago. And
yeah,
it affected the nation.
You talked about filmmaking, which I love. And by the way, there's a new image on our screen. This is also NC Wyeth's work. So we're just showing a couple of his works today. We're going to do in our next upcoming Save World Make Art episodes, we'll elaborate on some of the other artists, especially Pyle, and talk about not only the Brandywine Museum, but we'll talk about some other key components, places that you can visit nearby that are also equally as important and exciting. So we'll get into those in future episodes coming up. But right now, NC Wyeth is on the screen. And when you think about when this work was done, how photography and filmmaking hadn't really risen in people's mind to the elevation of what we would consider high art at all. So painters were that for most people that were either writing about art, talking about art, interested in art, viewing art. Painters were the pinnacle of what we call high art. When we say high art, we're really talking about the vast array of materials that were available and the type of art that was being produced. Painting seemed to sort of transcend all of those to this upper echelon in people's mind of the craft of, any type of art that was being made. Painting seemed to always rise to the top. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And the other thing too is, and we've talked about this before, because you have moved in and worked for decades in the world of fine art, and I've worked for decades in the world of illustration. And somebody decided, we talked about this before a long time ago, that those two had to be separate and sometimes conflicting, those worlds. And when you look at this piece that you're showing, this is a classic illustration piece by N.C. Wyeth. I actually, can you let me share the screen? I want to share a quick Howard Pyle.
Absolutely, go for it.
Awesome. So what I'm saying is then, in the realm of, get this over here, and this over here. Got to get Zoom to cooperate 1 second. Is it getting smaller? Yes, it is. Yay. Okay, here it is. So this is called An Attack on a Galleon. To me, all right, so these painters, and whether they were Monet painting impressionist works or this work, for me, that's one of the things that was pointed out regularly for me as a student, was that they're different. But for me, this has qualities of impressionism in it, as well as Monet's pieces have qualities of storytelling in it. And why make them comparative and conflicting?
I think we've come to the realization now that the fine art museums like the Detroit Institute of Arts have finally come to the conclusion that they need to recognize artists like the ones we're showing in the same galleries and have exhibitions, inside their museum that show this work at the same plateau as the other work. And that's pretty recent. I'm saying recent in the last 25 years, because even as a student, I may have mentioned in a prior episode that I saw Norman Rockwell's exhibit at the Historical Museum in Chicago. So years later, the Detroit Institute of Arts was showing his work in a special exhibition. So it showed you just in that period of time, the perception and how we've changed our views. But when we look at this work and we think about artists like the ones you mentioned, Monet, and I think of Degas, who visited many ballets and classical concerts and would do sketches. And then he'd take the sketches back to his studio to do the paintings that are what we consider to be his finished works. So those paintings weren't done in the same place as where those images that he was able to gather existed. They came from his sketches. So, when we think about illustrators as being, fictitious, and they're sort of taking a story and bringing it to life, well, that's what Degas was doing too. There really is the same process.
Yeah. So, this is an image from the Delaware Museum of Art. It's not too far away from the Brandywine Museum of Art. also NC Wyeth's home with his studio is also still in existence. And the studio is still set up. You can go visit it and see what it looked like, the same setup, his easel, I think, I don't know, maybe his paints are still out there or something. But we can go into that space. So that's what Eugene and I are talking about. We've been talking about making this trip for a long time. And we're putting together, we're organizing a visit. We don't know how many days. It's probably going to be maybe like 4 days, something like that, where we're going to visit this area. And there are also historical aspects to this area too, from the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. So it's going to be a trip to open up our eye and our heart to this. I mean, just this painting alone, I think it's on a really impressive scale. I remember seeing it in the Delaware Museum of Art, and I think it's like somewhere around 10 by 14 feet or something like that. It's really big. And same thing at the Brandywine Museum of Art. We're going to go and see the number of sketches that were done if they show a sketch show, the scale that these people work at. And so that's what we want to invite you guys along. We're going to set up something so that people can come with us.
Yes. And as we mentioned, our upcoming episodes, what we'll do is we'll dedicate an episode to each of the places that Matt just mentioned, so that each episode will sort of dive into that particular place, whether it be a studio or another museum, and let you get a feel for like a little mini walking tour of these destinations that would be part of a wonderful experience, a trip, a travel, art, historical event with Matt and Huge, something that we can really absorb and, take in. But you were talking about the scale of that painting. And I think one of the, pardon me, let me just get a little sip. I think one of the things that's missing for young artists who may have not had the pleasure of working with the tactile materials, and that they work primarily digitally and always have, the scale of your work is always going to be confined to the size of the digital tool that you're using. And yes, you can have those things printed larger and see them larger, but most often we never do because it's very costly. But what we learned about these artists is that if their work was going to be reproduced in full color for, like a
Harper's Magazine.
Yeah, magazine or something like that, they would have to work large so that when it was shot down, everything got tighter and finer details. So that's exactly why we see that. But hey, we're running out of time. So you and I are going to sing a song. You may hear some stuff in the background. It's just my family. Don't worry about it. Hey, I'm Eugene Clark, and you are?
I'm Matt Faulkner, I think.
And the name of our program is
Save World, Make Art.
And we want to say thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll talk to you in our next episode. Bye-bye, everybody.
Peace. Peace.